Waiters and waitresses of Reddit, what is the most awkward couple date you have ever witnessed at work? A girl hit on me in front of her BF when I was serving. The BF walked off after staring her off and the girl awkwardly sat there alone for a while. I asked a girlfriend to take over her table, cause it was too awkward. I work at a dinner theater, and we usually do proposals where we set up a random draw where the winner comes up on the stage to win their prize, and are then surprised by their partner who proposes. It's usually sweet and makes everybody in the room all fuzzy and warm. This one guy wanted to take it further and requested to perform a song. He brought his own music and everything. We're pretty easygoing at this job, so we agree to let him do it. We do the fake draw. The woman comes up on stage in front of a room of 400 people, and the music starts to play. Apparently this guy was a little nervous, and he compensated by having a few drinks. So what follows is a slurred performance of a song written by this guy that seemed to focus on how he was sorry for cheating on this woman with her sister, and at the end of it, he gets down on one knee and proposes. Usually this gets a round of applause, encouraging the person to say yes, but not after that train wreck of a performance. The poor woman was just holding her face the entire time and starts shaking her head and says, "No, what's wrong with you?" She storms off and leaves him and our stage manager on stage to a bunch of murmuring from the audience. The only thing our stage manager can think of to say on mic is, "Well, that's that." The guy ended up staying for the rest of the show and had many more drinks. That was years ago and it still remains one of the cringiest things I've ever seen. First date, I would estimate college age. They're eating and the girl says, "I'm having a really nice time, but my friend just texted me and asked me if I wanted to hang out, and I said yes, so I actually have to go." Ouch. Couple came into the restaurant dressed very goth. I wasn't their server but I was running the cash register just a few feet away. They proclaimed to everyone that they were energy vampires, but not to fear them because they won't hurt us. They said they didn't need our food for sustenance, but enjoyed the tasted. After ordering the meal they then politely asked the waitress if she would stick around for a second so they could feed off of her aura so they could have enough energy for the night. The waitress said okay and gave me a side glance over her shoulder that I knew meant I better get a good tip for this. The couple clasped each other's hands, closed their eyes, and made sucking sounds for a solid minute before leaning back in the seats and sighing as if they had just had a turkey dinner. The waitress was indeed tipped well for her delicious energy. Late to the party but I will share my story. Had a couple come in one night and everything seemed to be going fine. We just hired a new server who was training and I asked her if she had any questions. She was still nervous about greeting tables so I told her she could shadow me and watch what I do. We go over to the couple's table and all I hear from the new server is, "You freaking B, I knew you were cheating on me." Turns out the guy was her BF on a date with his side chick and he didn't know she just got a job there. She didn't get fired for what she said. I hope she adopted that as her greeting for every table. When I was bartending this guy came into the bar on a weeknight. Average looking guy, late 20s. He sat down and asked for a drink and told me he was nervous because it was his first date in 3 years and they had met on Tinder. He arrived 20 minutes before her expected arrival to get rid of some of his nerves. 2 hours passed and he waited for her with no text or call explaining she would be late. This woman walks up to the guy and I'm thinking, wow, she really came. She looks at him and says, "Are you Joe?" The guy replies yes and gets up to properly greet her looking incredibly excited. She says no thanks and just leaves. What a foul creature. Joe, not his real name. And I proceeded to get way too drunk for a Tuesday. Poor average Joe. Way too drunk for a Tuesday. If God didn't want us to get blitzed on a Tuesday, he wouldn't have given us tequila to wash down our tacos. I worked at a fondue place. 1.52-hour meal for 2 people. 4 courses. The works. Couple came in and he had pre-arranged with us to present an engagement ring with a chocolate course with melted chocolate on the plate spelling "Will you marry me?" also roses and other embellishments on the plate. Apparently the entire meal she was explaining to him how bad he was at being in a relationship. Too needy, too emotional, somehow also didn't spend enough time with her and wasn't connecting with her. It was an hour-long breakup speech. We come around the corner with candles lit in the chocolate fondue and the engagement ring on the plate. The table next to them did everything they could to wave us off. I was holding a camera to capture the magical moment, which never came. He tried to get his prepared remarks out, but it was so bad we eventually left the dessert at the table and tried to act like nothing had happened. She left before the check came. Husband and wife fight. Wife cried. Husband got up and threw a pizza slice at her face. I cry about a lot of things, but if my BF threw a pizza in my face I'd be freaking livid. Date seemed going well, but the guy was nervous and fidgety. He was rocking back on his chair a little as he would talk and eventually flew too close to the sun, toppled his chair backwards and knocked himself out cold, and peed his pants. He had to be taken out of the dining room on a stretcher over the span of 20 minutes, while his Tinder date did the honorable thing and immediately went to the bar and ordered shots. We gave them to her on the house. Toppled his chair backwards and knocked himself out cold. Oh crap. And peed his pants. Oh crap. Well told, friend. I guess you could call this a couple date. I was working at a wine bar when a married couple sat down on a pretty slow night. I went over the specials and they ordered. Once appetizers came out, the man thought it would be a good idea to serve his wife divorce papers. I did my best to avoid that side of the bar. I did bring out tissues for the wife who was breaking down. I ended up boxing up the dinner. The guy paid, but I do not envy that ride home. This happened to someone I know. It was a complete surprise to her. He had never once mentioned divorce. Things seemed to be going okay between them. And then one night he took her out to dinner and told her he had already started the paperwork. They had been married something like 15 years too. Served a deaf couple having a fight. They went from both of them signing furiously to her crying and signaling to me for a stack of napkins for, I assumed, her tears. She whips out a pen and starts writing paragraph after paragraph angrily. It was awkward because I kept having to come back to the table since they ordered multiple courses and he was just eating and signing while she was hunched over the table writing away while crying. When they finally left they tipped me pretty well though, so I guess it wasn't too bad. I remember a deaf guy who used to have a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He'd kind of seek out the staff and make a big deal out of not being understood. Backfired when my friend served him and signed really freaking well. According to her, he could barely sign at all and he just stood there awkwardly with the rug pulled out from under him. IDK if this counts, but when I was a waitress at Olive Garden, one of my tables was going over their divorce paperwork. When I greeted the table I asked how everyone was and the woman said, "Terrible. We are getting a divorce." Like WTF do I say to that? One of my first jobs in New York was managing a lounge cocktail bar in a high-end hotel. At around 3 or 4 o'clock, a guy that looked pretty cheesy, slicked back hair, bad suit etc., came up to me and demanded that he get that window table tonight for his date. He had a reservation for 8 p.m. I explained to him that I can't guarantee it etc and he slipped me $400 with the how about now look, in which I eventually caved in and told him that I'd take care of it. He then pulled another stack of hundreds and started counting them in front of me while asking if I could go a little extra by coming over to the table when he was there with the date and pretend that I knew him from a movie. At this point, if I've gone this far, why not? Sure enough, he rolled around later in the evening with a blonde bimbo, and after they'd had a glass of champagne I approached the tables around them, checked on how they were doing before going over to him and did the whole "how are you enjoying your evening," and before walking off I did an Oscar-worthy double take with a "Are you, by any chance? You must be." At which point he had this douchy smile lapping up the recognition he was getting from this young dude he'd just paid off. Most importantly for him though, it worked. She was loving it, and they left shortly after and he slipped me another $600 on the way out. Was totally expecting him to be a douche and leave a crappy no tip on the bill. Guy might have acted like a douche, but at least he had the cash to support the act. Was a cocktail waitress at a bar in a high-end restaurant a couple years ago. This couple comes in right around peak hours. Guy looks annoyed. Girl looks really excited. The whole time the girl is trying to talk to this guy and he's completely ignoring her. He gets a call and talks on the phone for a good 10 minutes, hangs up and starts talking to anyone around him but her. He's getting more and more drunk and starts hitting on the female bartender and eventually the cocktail waitresses, myself included, telling us he could get us all much better jobs in Atlanta. The girl he's on a date with has started crying at this point, and once he actually notices, he yells at the bartender because it was obviously restaurant's fault for her being upset. She yells at him to stop yelling at the bartender because he's been such an awful date, and he goes off. Tells her he didn't even want to eat here. She should have picked a better place, and he isn't paying for her food and drinks. He then tells her that she didn't look fat in her picture and he wouldn't have asked her out if he'd known she was that big, probably met online kind of thing. She retreats to the bathroom and the guy continues to make a scene. Another girl at the bar and I go to check on her while the bartenders and manager try to deal with him. The girl is super upset and I tell her there's a back door she can leave through and I can get her tab from the bartender. I go back out and the guy had already stormed out and refused to pay, leaving his date with a nearly $200 check. She didn't have the money to pay, so a couple of the bar regulars covered it. Made the whole night super awkward and stressful. Definitely one of the more memorable experiences of that place. Bar regulars being bros. In law school I always worked the Sunday morning shift at the restaurant in town and it was always so dead, but I'd bring homework so it was mostly okay. Every other week, this couple would come in and order G&Ts and nachos and sit for hours talking about how attracted they were to each other, their sex life, and would joke about sneaking around and whatnot. I never thought much of it, until one day, I walked into the dining room from the kitchen and saw the lady had already been seated in a booth facing me. Her dude's bald head was across from her, facing away from me. I approached the table, about to ask the lovebirds if they wanted their usual, when the dude turned around and it was a different dude. The lady looked at me sheepishly as he mentioned to me it was his wife's birthday and they had never been at my restaurant before. LMAO. Like, how do you even react in such a situation? Really little guy, maybe 5'4", 120 pounds, comes in with a gigantic woman, probably 6 feet tall and easily 300 pounds. Both tatted the frick up with piercings to match. The woman orders her dish and before I get the guy's order, he says in a sexy voice, "I think you want more than that." She smirks at him, says, "You know I do," and orders 3 more entrees. This was clearly a thing for them. They seemed incredibly happy together and became regulars at my restaurant. I feel like I played a not insignificant role in this bizarre couple's eating fetish for like 3 years. There was a couple at my work having drinks. Girl went to the toilet, came back and admitted that she'd been sleeping with the guy's brother. Apparently glasses were thrown across the room and they both got kicked out. Lem do some lines before I lay this on him. I had a mid-40s man with a young and attractive mid-20s woman sitting at the bar. They were engaging in small talk and ordering drinks. Nothing out of the ordinary. After possibly 45 minutes a lady storms into the bar and immediately goes up to them. She grabs the man by the shoulder and says you're C, and walks out. The man turned to his perceived date and says yeah. She does that and then left the room, leaving his date to sit there, staring blankly into oblivion until she left. Odd. Kinky couples foreplay. Sucks for the random chick though, just a pawn in their naughty game. Not exactly a date, but I served a couple one time who had met up to discuss the terms of their divorce at the fancy-ish restaurant I worked at the time. They came before the dinner rush, so they were pretty much my only table, and every time I'd check in on them the wife was extremely angry, tearful, and they were bickering about holiday schedules for their daughter, timeshares, etc. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was extremely awkward to butt in to change out their forks or refill drinks while they were so emotionally charged. Seems like they were handling the situation much better than a lot of couples though. A girl brought 2 Tinder dates and played them off each other game show style. They seemed to be unaware this was what would happen. Splitting the bill was hilarious. I was really hoping you going to end it with the guys left her there and went over to the bar together. Was a bartender waiter a few years back and I was delivering some food to her table to find out that it was my ex and her new boyfriend sitting at the table. We had only stopped seeing each other a month earlier, so it was incredibly awkward for everyone. I'd say that she did it on purpose. I was at one of these fancy speakeasy type bars they've started opening up, installing a new invoice printer for their point of sale system. Waiting for the printer firmware and driver to install can take 30 or 40 minutes on slower computers, so I'm people watching. As I'm standing there watching bars fill up, I notice a gorgeous blonde in her late 20s is sitting with a very well manicured looking guy in his mid 40s. He's dressed like he just left a high dollar law firm, and she looks like she's going to a fancy professional cocktail party after their date. He is polite, talkative, and super into her, but you can tell that she isn't reciprocating the feelings. To be honest, by the look on her face, she's anywhere but in that bar at the moment. The guy goes to the bathroom and she quickly picks up her phone and frantically calls someone and begs for pickup ASAP. The gist of the call was the guy was her mother's co-worker and her mother had set the date up, and our girl really wasn't feeling it. About 15 minutes later, a guy around her age comes in, throws some cash on the table and excuses them. She cites some vague emergency and is escorted out. The older guy continues drinking. $140 tab. Note that I'm standing at their main cash register, and starts flirting with the waitress. Fails to get her number. Pays in exact change without tipping, and leaves. Dang, everybody had a bad night. This trashy couple I served were disgusting people to begin with, and to top it off the woman was trying to be sneaky and jerk him off under the table. Unfortunately I saw this happening and just pretended like nothing was happening because I didn't want to deal with it. When I was waitressing in college, I witnessed the single most embarrassing thing to happen to a person to date. Right in the middle of their dinner, and in the middle of our Friday night dinner rush, this poor guy stands up, taps his wine glass to get everyone's attention, and then proceeds to tell everyone what a fantastic person his GF is, how much he loves her, and how lucky he is to have her in his life. The whole time this is happening, she is just sitting there watching him with the most boring look on her face. It was so weird, kind of like, yeah, tell me something I don't know. Then poor guy pulls out a ring, gets on one knee and asks her to marry him. She gives him the most disgusted look imaginable and says, "This is the ring you expect me to say yes to? Are you retarded? Could you be any cheaper?" Then she gets up and walks out, leaving the poor guy just kneeling there. I didn't charge him for the meal. Bro, dodge a bullet there. Working at a Chili's on Valentine's Day, the girl gave me her number with her boyfriend in the bathroom. I came back and had to deal with her being sweet to him and nice the rest of the dinner. I did not call or text her, just was weird every time she'd look me in the eyes following. Oh heck, that just reminded me of a friend and a girl he was going out with. She was eyeing flirting with this other guy at bar. He got up and walked over to the guy, brought him back over to her, introduced them and walked out. No anger, no drama, just walked out. It was freaking hilarious to see it. Of course she chased after him apologizing. He dropped her that evening. SHHHH. Like this video, but do it quietly so you don't wake up the sleeping papa. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.